people vote for, in my community, vote for Democrats no matter what, but they don't like Democrats.
During an interview with Pod Save America, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez discussed Democratic voters, and she said something that other Democratic politicians simply won't admit to. Watch.
One of the worries I had when the Democrats won the House is there's going to be a lot of expectation from people who don't pay super close attention to politics that Democrats won the House, now everything's going to be great.
Yeah.
And we only control one House of Congress, so we can't promise that much. But is that going to create more disappointment
Well,
with people?
When I go back home, it's not about winning. It's about fighting. And every time I come home, people say, thank you for trying. Thank you for fighting for us. That's the number one thing that I hear when I go back home. And it's because they know it's not, I come from a district that is like D plus 24 or something like that. People vote for, in my community, vote for Democrats no matter what, but they don't like Democrats.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, they don't love the party. And I think that's the mistake that we have. We take young people for granted. We take communities of color for granted. We take working class people for granted. And we just say, oh, well, you're going to vote for us no matter what because we're the lesser of two evils.
Right.
So like there's this entitlement that's like, it's your fault you don't vote. It's your fault that you don't vote. And if you only voted, we would pass all of these things for you. That's bullshit.
Right.
That's bullshit.
Yeah.
And that's why I unseated a 20-year incumbent that was the fourth most powerful person in the party. And the argument that I made, some people were saying, oh, well, he's going to be the next speaker. Do we really want to give up that power to our district? And I said, how much of that power has been used to improve our lives?
Yeah.
How much of it? And I think that's when people were saying, you know what? We should have a change.
So in case you're wondering why Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is so popular, you just got a taste as to why. She is willing to say things that other Democratic politicians simply won't. The party is not popular. People don't like most Democrats. I mean, all you have to do is look at some polling. So you'd think, well, if the Democratic Party was, so popular, people loved voting for them, then people would want to identify as Democrats, right? But they don't. So Gallup polling has been looking at this trend since 2004. And in all the recent polls, I mean, the past couple of years have been like this, where the Democratic Party is actually the least popular out of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. So when people are asked, how do you self-identify, either as Republican, Independent, or Democrats, the latest poll on this from July, 29% say Republicans, 38% say Independents, and only 27% say Democrats. So this proves AOC's point. Democrats simply aren't popular. And a lot of that stems from the leadership of the Democratic Party. So politicians like AOC are outliers. I mean, she's somebody that actually speaks to the people, someone that doesn't take any corporate money, doesn't have any private fundraisers, simply is run on grassroots support. And I'm going to get to how effective she is at that in a second here. But the other point she makes there, I mean, there's this mentality from a lot of Democratic politicians that the onus is on the voter. Oh, if you want change, well, you have to come out and vote for us. But it doesn't work that way. I mean, it sounds nice. Yeah, sure. Tell the voter to come out and vote for you. But you have to give most people a reason to come out and vote. Now, look, I say all the time, I mean, if you watch me, I say you have to vote. Voting is a tool. Even if you're voting for the lesser of two evils, it is still the lesser of two evils. You have to use your vote as a tool. A vote isn't an expression of, your most inner your most inner desires of how the country should be. A vote is a tool. So I would suggest people do vote. But the reality is a lot of people don't. Almost half of people don't vote. They're completely disengaged from the whole system because they see a lot of politicians. Most politicians don't actually represent them. Most politicians are run on corporate money, on PAC money, on private fundraisers with big donors, with people that don't represent their best interests. So when you have politicians surrounded by all these special interests, that this is who they hang out with at these private fundraisers, how do you think politicians, how do you think that's going to impact the worldview? It will obviously have an impact on how they view policy issues. If who you were talking to are the wealthiest people in society, the top 10% or the top 1% of society, you're going to have a very skewed view on how most people feel about Democrats and about the system in general. Now, as AOC points out here, the argument you hear is that is, quote, do we want to give up the power a Democratic leader holds? So like in her case, when she was going for Joe Crowley's seat, like that's an argument that people make. Oh, Joe Crowley, he's part of the Democratic leadership. Do you really want to give that power that this district holds because of Joe Crowley? But you have to ask yourself, how is that power being used? Because if the power that Joe Crowley had wasn't being used in the best interest of people, which it wasn't, then who cares about the power? I mean, it's all about what these politicians, what the leadership is actually doing. Now, as I was saying, you need uncorrupted candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So there are the rare politicians like her, AOC, Tlaib, and some other Justice Democrats that don't take any corporate money, that are simply run on small individual donors. And let me show you how effective these politicians are at that. So in AOC's case, this story came out last month. U.S. Representative Ocasio-Cortez raised $1.2 million in the second quarter alone. The bulk of Ocasio-Cortez's fundraising came in donations of less than $200, an indication that she is successfully raising money online from grassroots supporters. By comparison, Hakeem Jeffries, the head of the House Democratic Caucus and also of New York, raised about $845,000 for his re-election bid in the same period. He had $2.2 million in cash at the end of the quarter. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, a Republican of Louisiana who is one of the chamber's most prolific fundraisers, raised $1.4 million in the first quarter of the year. So AOC is outraising or almost matching the most prolific fundraisers in both parties simply on small individual donors. And those politicians, by the way, Steve Scalise and Hakeem Jeffries, they do not rely on small individual donors. They rely on corporate money, on private fundraisers, on PAC money. So even with the big money backers they have behind them, Hakeem Jeffries wasn't able to raise anywhere near that AOC did. And Steve Scalise only raised a little bit more in the first quarter compared to how much AOC raised in the second quarter. And on top of that, AOC also outraised several candidates that either were running for president or are running for president, including Bill de Blasio, Mike Gravel, John Hickenlooper, and Tim Ryan. She outraised all of them. And she's just in a small district in New York. Now, understand here, this is the power of speaking to people's real issues. This is why she's able to do this. I mean, it's one thing if, she won her race and then just completely sold out. Once she got in, she wouldn't be able to raise this kind of money. But because she is fighting, and because she continues to only rely on individual donors, she is able to gain the trust of people in her district and around the country and raise this sort of money.